Good morning, one and all, and welcome back to Through the Pages with Dee. So first, before I get into the review, that are the quirky little review I'm about to do today, I just want to again thank both John and Jacob for last night's hospitality on their channel. Me and Joe's had a great time. It didn't matter to us about the time that it was, because John is an amazing person, so is Jacob. And just really to be a part of that, and actually just to even be asked to go on John's channel was such an honour for us that it wouldn't have mattered what time it was. Yes, I do. Day After Dark should maybe become a thing. I think maybe John's planted a seed in there now that's ticking away. It's like, oh, maybe I could, play on that. So maybe that's going to be a thing in the future. Thank you, John, for that idea. And some of the people in the chat who said it. And again, for everybody who showed up in the chat and who sent such really touching messages, and there just aren't words to express how much all this kind of stuff means to you when you're just a normal, average person who jumps on YouTube and goes, do you know what? I'm not really shy, so I'm just going to give it a go. And you do, and that's the kind of feedback that you get. And it just means the world to actually realise that, no matter the distance, no matter the seas you have to cross, there are people out there who appreciate what you do and you appreciate them in return. And I felt like there was a lot of that I didn't really say last night, because towards the end I got stupidly a bit emotional like I do, because like I said, I'm a big crybaby. The older I get, the worse I get. And afterwards I was talking with Jules about it, and we were just so overwhelmed by just all of it really, and how it actually makes you feel. So before anybody, skips, I mean, you can skip this part, but just to John and Jacob again, thank you so much for being as cool as you are. Thank you to everybody in the chat who commented during the filming and who said just such amazing, lovely things. Thank you to everybody who's subscribed to this channel now off the back of that. If any of you do actually manage to get to watch the mental health video, please leave a comment. Let us know how it made you feel. If you have any thoughts to a book, or really anything, any words of advice for anybody who's struggling with mental health, that's the purpose of the video, is to help anyone out there. Books are just one sort of avenue you could go down to maybe give you a little bit of release of that kind of issue that you might be suffering with, but it's something very close to mine and Jocelyn's heart, and we really wanted to do that video proud with the limited resources that we have. We wanted to do it proud, and I hope we've achieved that. Some of the guys said that we have, so that makes us feel like, even just for those few that have said it, that we have achieved something, and it is quite possibly our proudest moment of YouTube is that video. So I will put that at the end, just so that you can watch that if you can't maybe find it, and YouTube's maybe hiding it from you. It's not in the algorithms or whatever, but we'll do that. We'll tag it into this video. So thank you guys. Thank you, Talking Story, for just being an amazing channel, being amazing people, embracing people as family, and for everybody who's was there at the live and who's watched it afterwards. Thank you to you all. It means a lot to us. So from that, let's go to where I'm doing something a little bit different. Now, it's not vastly different. I don't mean sort of I'm going to start juggling 3 balls. It's not anything like that, or, suddenly my dog's going to know how to talk and she's going to jump in the video. It's nothing that amazing. I did something a little bit different, meaning I'm not a huge television watcher these days. I spend huge amounts of my time reading. Hence why there is stacks and stacks of books on my table here that I will go to read. That's all I do now. At weekends I take a break, and recently at weekends I've started watching more, but that's not normally these days what I do. I was a huge film watcher. I always have been. That's kind of where I would go for entertainment, is to watch a film. But I haven't done that in quite some time. But in regards to this book, we know as general that a lot of films are based from books. They do these. They make these books and they're an adaptation. They make these films and they're an adaptation of a book. Some are vastly adapted and others stay quite true to the story. So when I read this particular book, which I'm reviewing today, I was very curious to the film adaptation. So just so I clear it up, the book I'm talking about is Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? So off the back of Britain raving about PKD, I was very intrigued to find out who this author is and what he's about. I've never heard of him. Didn't even know he was related to a film. But just off the back of Britain's recommendation, I thought, okay, Britain raves about Philip, I'm going to give him a read. So I liked the title of this book. I thought it was quirky and I thought, that's quite an interesting title. I wonder where that book's going to lead. Then I realised through the book that I purchased, which was the Penguin edition, that it related to the film Blade Runner. Again, I had no knowledge of this. I didn't know that Blade Runner was based off a book. I guess I've been living in a hole for quite some time because other people knew. My partner, for instance, knew that it was a book. So I decided I'd got quite far into Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. I'd got quite far into it. I was maybe 2-3 chapters away from the end and decided, you know what? I think I'm going to watch the film. So on YouTube, I rented the film. And as I say, 2-3 chapters away from the end of finishing the book, I watched the film. And I decided I'm going to do a comparison review. So here we go. Here's my comparison review. What I will start by saying is, and this may upset some, I am a child born in the 70s, so I grew up in the 80s. So really, Blade Runner may well have been a film I watched that my memory banks just don't remember. But I must confess that when I watched it, I didn't remember any of it. I knew Harrison Ford was in it, and I had some familiarity of Rutger Hauer being in a film, something like that. And then obviously once I'd watched it, I made the connection. But what I preferred was the book. That may stun some people because I'm quite aware that a lot of people do actually like the film Blade Runner. I won't say that I didn't like it. I won't say I didn't like the film. But in comparison to the book, it's a very 50-50 break. What I mean by that is it's very 50% to the book and it's very 50% away from the book. There are elements in the book that I found extremely interesting, such as the handset, which is I can't remember its actual name, but it is a device where it has kind of handlebars and you put your hands on it and you type in a number and it gives you the feeling of that number for the day. So for instance, if you wanted to feel euphoric, but it's more precise than that. It's not just about feeling euphoric. It's about feeling euphoric about a particular thing. So there are hundreds and hundreds of codes to put into this this machine. Oh, empathy box it's called. So you go to your empathy box, you type in a code, and you would be given this feeling. So say if I wanted to feel euphoric about the qualities of chocolate, there would be a code for that and I would type it into the empathy box and it would give me that feeling for the day. I don't think it's quite that precise, but you get the gist of what I mean. That wasn't included in the film, which kind of disappointed me because I thought that was a fantastic element from the book that they could have put in the film. However, I will give this argument. The book is, whilst it still has dark quantities, the film is a lot grittier. It doesn't really specify in the book that the setting is in Japan, but in the film it's made very obvious that the setting is Japan. They've also tweaked the characters quite a bit and the storylines quite a bit. So in the book, our main character, who is Richard Deckard, he's a bounty hunter. He isn't the prioritary bounty hunter. He's not the main guy. The main guy is actually a bounty hunter called David Holden. But in the film, Deckard is the main bounty hunter, and David Holden is secondary to him. Something does happen to both David Holdens in both book and film, but of a different nature. So whereas when Harrison Ford is playing Deckard in the film, he's this idolised bounty hunter. He's the best they've got, the best they've ever seen. Whereas in the book, Deckard is the second choice to Holden. He's not as good as Holden, but he's every police department is only allowed to have 2 bounty hunters. So we have Holden and we have Deckard, and Deckard is secondary to Holden. But as I say, something happens to Holden, so he's not able to continue. He's in hospital recuperating, so they have to bring Deckard in. So he gets this kind of opportunity of a lifetime, if you like, to prove himself as a bounty hunter. Whereas in the film, Harrison Ford has already proved himself as the best bounty hunter and has actually stepped away from being in the force. But then with this situation that's going on with these 6 Andys, which I will explain, they call him in, they call him back because he's the best, and they need him to deal with these 6 Andys. Now, Andys are artificial intelligence. They just shorten it to Andys, both book and film. So this is the purpose of Deckard's job, is to seek and destroy the Andys. Another element that is different from book to film is Rachel Rosen. Now, in the book, Rachel Rosen is an Andy. She's not quite sure she's an Andy, but she has been created by this corporation as kind of the first of her kind. She is a Nexus, I can't remember the number, but she's a Nexus something. This is her model type. I haven't actually put it in my notes, which is very silly of me. But she is a Nexus something, and she is kind of a alpha model to see how it performs. So they are using her to see if she can outsmart the bounty hunters as AI. And she almost, in the book, she almost pulls it off. Whereas in the film, she openly admits to being an Andy. Whereas in the book, she has to take a test and prove herself, which Deckard performs. Deckard goes to the company and he performs this test. And he does say that she's Andy, but there are sort of questions. Is she? Is he? He's kind of, the way I interpreted what the book was saying was that he's not entirely 100% certain. So they do eventually. The guy who's dealing with the creation, he does eventually admit that she is an AI and tries to bargain with him, tries to make a deal with him to keep quiet about it. This doesn't happen in the film. Another element with Rachel is that we have a character called Pris, who in the film is played by Daryl Hannah. And the idea in the book is that Pris and Rachel are the same model of shell for this AI, yet in the film, they're completely different. So that too is a complete change, and a very big change in regards to how the story plays out in the book to how the story plays out in the film. And I think that was quite a flaw from the film's perspective, because as you read the book and you are reading that, at some point Deckard starts to grow feelings for Rachel, and he's not impressed with himself that he's getting feelings for an Andy, but he is growing feelings for her. There's just something about Rachel that brings him in. So the daunting prospect of these 6 Andys that he has to destroy, Pris being one of them, obviously has extra connotations to it, because Rachel and Pris are the same shell, the same model, whereas that doesn't have the same effect in the film because they're not the same, they're completely different. So I missed that element as well in the film. So this is why I say, for me, the book was better, because it had all these other underlying sort of reasonings as to why Deckard might be struggling or why this might be hard for him. There was also the whole thing with regards to Deckard as to, in the book, with the electric sheep thing, is this whole story of animals and how important it is to have an animal. So in the book, if you have an animal, a live animal, you are considered somewhat along the lines of nobility. Yet this wasn't even touched on in the film. Now, this I do understand. This element I understand. This was quite cute in the book. It gave the book a kind of cutesy element, a kind of sweet element. In the film, that wouldn't have worked. This film is gritty. It's quite dark. It's filmed in that way. It's kind of, even though it's set in Japan in the future, to me, it had kind of a noir feel about it. And that bringing that storyline into that type of film of, you know, Harrison Ford playing Deckard, having a sheep or a goat, would have been an oddball thing to put in the film. The film would have had to have been quite an amount lighter, and maybe more comedy based for that to work. But it works hugely in the book. I appreciate that part of the book. It's kind of, even though Deckard's got this task of annihilating these 6 Andys, and the potential daunting task of one of them looking like the Andy that he's fallen in love with, even though in the book he's married, it kind of adds a side story to Deckard on this huge quest that he's on to replace his sheep. Now, his sheep is an AI. It's an Andy, because he had a sheep and it died. So rather than let the neighbours know, because this, as I say, is like a stand-in in the community. If you have a live animal, you are looked upon as better than those that don't. So he's been pretending all this time that this sheep is actually real. And you do have to look after it like a normal sheep. You still have to feed it and stroke it, etc., and maybe shave its wool, what have you. But this one particular day, he goes to the sheep's control panel, and his neighbour Barbara sees him do this. Now, Barbara has a horse, and this horse is with foal, and so therefore she's pregnant, about to have a foal. And Deckard is kind of trying to get Barbara to sell him the foal, because he's so desperate to actually own a living animal, because it gives you a stature. And not just that, it will make his wife happy. And I just thought it was such a funny little element within the book, where even, like, sort of during breaks through his hunting of these Andys, he's going to pet shops and trying to find a pet that he can afford. There's actually even a catalogue in the book where you can look up the price of animals. Some are rare and some are, what's the word? Extinct. You can't get an owl, for instance. Owls are extinct. So it was just those cute little elements of the animal side story with Deckard that I really enjoyed in the book. And I felt that was missing from the film. But as I say, the film's feel, the film's look, it wouldn't have been right to add that element. They maybe could have swapped it for an animal more threatening, maybe like, I don't know, maybe a tiger or a black panther, but maybe times as they were, extinction as it is, you know. Maybe the director didn't feel that he wanted that kind of animal potential cruelty within the film. So he maybe just left that part out. But overall, I mean, the endings are very different as well. With Deckard, we get him kind of satisfied in a way in his existence, and realising that his realisation is kind of maybe that not all androids are bad, not all Andys are necessarily bad, and not all Andys need to really be maybe looked at as bad. Whereas in the film version, it's very much kind of a love story between Deckard and Rachel. There is no wife in the film, and there is none of Deckard sort of using the empathy machine. It's just purely this old school bounty hunter who has got this excellent reputation for catching his Andys, and they call him back because they've got no other alternative. And it's very much this battle of wits between Harrison Ford and Rutger Hauer. And it's a good film. It's not horrendous. I wouldn't say it was something I'd potentially watch again. It's very much of its time. i.e. 1982. And the other sad thing is as well, I'm not too sure, I didn't really research into this, maybe I should have told, but bad day. But I don't know if Philip K. Dick was fully aware of the context of the film and if he was on board with the amount of adaptation being made, the differences from book to film. But he died literally weeks before the film Blade Runner was due to be done. And I found that quite sad, because if he had, obviously he had to sell the rights of the story, so he had some knowledge of this film being made. But how much input did he actually have into it? Was there, did he say that he was okay with this amount of changes, that, to turn this quite, even though it has its dark elements in relation to, the Andys being killed and the way they're killed, and the potential threat that Deckard is under when he does face the Andys. It has those elements, but it's not quite as dark as the film. So, yeah, I found that quite sad that maybe Philip K. Dick didn't actually get to see the final outcome if he did have some knowledge, which he must have done, because he must have sold the rights. But, yeah, I find that quite sad that he didn't get to actually see that, and maybe potentially know what his opinion of it was, whether he was, completely satisfied with the outcome, or whether he felt, whether it was an honour to his book, or whether he felt like they'd taken it too far. But I suppose, when an author's concerned, once you've sold your rights, unless you put it as part and parcel of the contracts and terms and conditions, do you really have that much of a say in the film? Maybe that's why so many films are adapted to the extent that they are, because once the rights are sold, if the author doesn't actually specify, I want actual input in this, then it can be quite dramatically changed. But yeah, that's the way I wanted to go with this review. So my overall here is even though they're based on one kind of thread of a story, which is basically Deckard and what he's doing to catch and destroy these Andys, even though it's based on that thread, the different weaves of both contexts, as in the book and the film, I do prefer the book. But what I will say is this: they both have their own worth. The book is very, very kooky, very quirky, kind of eccentric, hence the title as well. It's kind of an eccentric sci-fi look on what the future could possibly be and how we're going to live in it once, mankind does what it does to it, and, there's rulers and things change, and with this empathy machine. So it's kind of, and sort of the reality of this, what you're told is reality with regards to this sort of higher being called Mercer, and whether or not you should believe that, and finding out the truth for yourself. That's all part of the book. The film has similar elements, but what they've done with the film is they've simplified it. They've taken out a lot of the quirkiness. They've taken out a lot of the eccentricity of the book, which I personally missed. I wanted the eccentricities in the film, but if they'd have added the eccentricities into the film, it would no longer have been the film that it is. It would no longer have been what a lot of people consider the 1982 classic Blade Runner. So we have to allow, I suppose, for those differences for that film to be somewhat of the icon that it is. So, resting my case for this argument, as in Philip K. Dick versus Blade Runner, I believe there is no versus. I believe both, even though I say I prefer the book's story, I believe that both complement each other. I believe that the adaptation made from the works of Philip K. Dick, in this instance of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, I believe that the interpretation made of it was to make a very different point and give a very different image. And as I say, it created what some people do consider as an 82 classic, which is Blade Runner. So I would say give both a chance. If you haven't seen Blade Runner, give it a watch. I would say if you haven't read Philip K. Dick, absolutely give that author a read. I think he's fantastic. I think he was, I should say, fantastic. He had absolutely exceptional writing ability. His imagination was way out there and so fantastical that, to be thinking of this future where just to have a status, we would need an animal, not just any animal, but the more curious, the animal, as in camel or goat, or, you know, the more extreme the type of animal, the more you are looked at as being that better kind of person. I really enjoyed that element, and the empathy box and Mercer, and the way that when you went into the empathy box, at times you would speak to Mercer, and Deckard has a very particular relationship with Mercer. But I don't want to go too deep, because where this is concerned, I want you to experience them for yourselves. So if you have any thoughts on this review, please pop your ideas and your thoughts in the comments. And yeah, that's how I felt about Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and how I felt about Blade Runner. And I just thought it would be quite nice to compare the two together. So that's the review for today. It is Wednesday, and for the time being, the sun is shining in Manchester. But it keeps fluctuating, so that's why there might be changes in the light. Again, we are very, very grateful to Talking Story. We're overwhelmed by the extra new amount of subscribers that we've had. We really appreciate that. Thank you so, so much. We are at over 160 now, so that's really shot up overnight. And yeah, as I say, please, if you do watch the mental health video that myself and my daughter did, please share it, because there is some useful links at the end of that video, which just might be a thing that somebody out there who hasn't seen it from mine or any of the booktubers shares. They might just need that right now. They might just need that today. That might just be the phone number or the website that helps them today. So if we can share that and get that out there as much as possible, and get that kind of spread around, so that not just the book content is acknowledged, because that may help, but so that those establishments at the end of that video get out there, and could potentially just be that anchor that somebody who's drowning needs. So yeah, so thank you so much, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, give it a like. If this is your first time coming to this channel and you like the content, why not subscribe? It's just one bit, and if you click that bell, you'll be notified every time I post a new video. And yeah, that's all I can ask for, really. And again, thank you all so much. Until next time, which will be Friday. Friday might be quite an interesting video. I am currently trying to suss out my top 10 of something, which is the second time I think I've done a top 10. I think I did characters. So this is the second only video of a top 10. So I think I'm doing a top 10 on Friday. So stay tuned for that. And hopefully next week we will be back in the studio. I explained kind of last night on Talking Story the reason why I'm still in downstairs with the equipment, just purely because of the neighbours and the noise upstairs. The walls are very thin, and if I've got to be on somebody else's channel whose time varies are so vast that it's quite late for me, that I will stay downstairs to do it, because going upstairs is next to a bedroom on their property. So, you know, it just may be a little bit loud if I start laughing, etc. Because I am quite a loud person. So, you know, I don't really want to be upsetting. So other than that, enjoy the rest of your day. As I say, thank you as always for all your kind words, your support, etc. We love you greatly. And until Friday, take care of yourselves, and I will see you guys through the pages. Bye-bye.